Hi everyone, I'm back again and I'm here to introduce the second of the Gold from the Vaults videos. Those videos captured from the 3 Up tour a couple of decades back. And we had Jerry last week, we've got Gary Zimmer this week, and next week we'll return to our standard How to Do It series. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a happy, healthy, fulfilling 2025, and I trust that your farming next year will be profitable and fun as you learn to work more closely with the natural system rather than against it. So in this special video, you'll get to experience the great Gary Zimmer at his evangelical best, as Gary describes the philosophical premise behind nutrition farming and what makes up a regenerative mindset. I'm hoping that you're going to find some value in his words, and once again, I wish you all the best for 2025.
By the way, I'm an eternal optimist. You got to realize this. And so my presentation tonight is going to be a little bit on the light side. I got to get a few trash out of the way first, but I'll start out with a story. And this story is really about, I'm not much of a storyteller or jokester kind of a guy. I like to put humor into my work because I got to keep people awake, and that was always my job as a teacher. And so anyway, this is about a bunch of birds in northern Wisconsin. And it's got 4 messages to the story. So you got to really pay attention to get these 4 messages. This is an educational story. And here it is. A bunch of birds are sitting around in northern Wisconsin. And they're sitting around one day, and it's a fall day. Fall, meaning our winter's coming. Your falls and your seasons are so mixed up, I can't tell which is which. Anyway, it's a fall day, and crops are ready to be harvested, and the corn is abundant. There's sunshine out there. There's food everywhere. It's beautiful out. And the old bird says, we got to head south. And the young birds are saying, why would we leave? It doesn't get any better. And the old bird says, look, winter's going to come and it's going to get ugly and it's going to get nasty. We got to head south. We got to get out of here. And then they sat around and argued for a while, and the young birds just wouldn't listen to them. Finally, the old bird says, we're going. You can do what you want to do. So they all took off, and this young bird stayed. Well, a month later, the crops are harvested. It's cold and nasty. There's no food left, and it's starting to snow. And the young bird said, oh, maybe I made a mistake. And so he started flying south, heading south. He got over southern Wisconsin. Remember, you guys head north, we head south. Just remember that. We're heading south where it's warmer. And he got over southern Wisconsin. He got caught in an ice storm. And he's flying along. And he got in this ice storm. And he came crashing down in his barnyard. And he's froze. And he's shivering. And this old cow came along in his barnyard. Kaplop, a manure pile right on top of him. And it was kind of warm under that manure pile. Felt pretty good. And so he started feeling pretty good. And he started chirping. And about that moment, the old tomcat came along. Heard the chirping. Dug him out and had lunch. The 4 messages. Did you get them? Number 1, we should have never turned our back on indigenous knowledge. Our ancestors spent centuries learning what we did. We almost lost herbal medicine because we thought the doctors could solve everything. We lost all this knowledge from centuries of getting these soils in balance and doing the things they did in green manure crops. We threw that all away, and about 50 years ago, we turned our attention to education, and we turned our back on our forefathers. We almost lost it. That's message number 1. Message number 2, the one that craps on you isn't necessarily your enemy. Now, you see, it was warm under there. What I mean by that is the guy that says environmental regulations. You got to back down on your nitrogen, you're going to back down on your chemicals. I'm taking your fungicides away. I'm taking your fumigants away. The guy that puts the old regulations out there to stop the farmers from doing what they've been doing. Not necessarily your enemy. And the guy that digs you out, new drugs, new chemicals, new technology. Not necessarily your friend. And the last message, if you got a warm, comfortable spot, keep your mouth shut. See, it's educational. Works, doesn't it? Thank you. Now I'm going to get a little of my grief out of the way. Did you read this in our papers? Australian trade agreement could devastate the U.S. dairy industry. Blasted all over our papers. You know what the article says? You guys sold your blood for milk. The war. When Bush called up to get support in the world, and Colin Powell called it to get support in the world, what do you think the truth was about? You guys got some good times coming. Well, supposedly, now I read in the paper yesterday, I heard in the news, that didn't sound so good from the Australian point of view. From our point of view, it's just devastating. We can't compete against you economically, so we're going to let you trade a little bit more if you go over and help fight our war. So anyway, they're anxious for us to eliminate our remaining tariffs on all dairy products. If the Australia and New Zealand would be given the keys to the candy store and the lights would be out for our dairy industry. They're also talking wheat, wool, and meat. is in the same article. I don't know where that's going to go, but you sure you want to do this? Are we that bad at books? Oh. It's dog-eat-dog world. I work with an organic guy out here. Our milk prices are 30-year low. We're down to $9 a hundred for milk. That's getting down close to your prices. Anyway, not quite there yet. This Amish guy, this Mennonite guy, he said, I don't mind. He said, my farming method can't compete against those big guys, and I better evaluate how I farm. He said, this low price, he said, they'll be gone long before I am. It takes $13 a hundred for those guys to break even. He said, I can make it on $9 milk, and they can't. Think about that end. My next little point was going to be on organics. This is the first scientific research report in Science magazine, May 31st, 2002, to compare organic to conventional agriculture. It's a 25-year study done in Switzerland. And you see, I farm organically, and I'm a real proponent and advocate of the organic standards. We're going to talk a little bit about organic. You see, because people buy organic food, I tell them, does that mean they get better quality food? Absolutely not. If it's grown on healthy, unmineralized soils, what is it? Sick, puny, bad crops. Why would that be better for you? I said to the organic farmer, the day they come up with a test that measures quality and nutritional value in food, you guys will have egg all over your face. Our new federal standards have teeth in them. They require you to not deplete soil quality, not damage water quality, and not deplete your natural resources. I did a training on our farm last November for the first group of organic inspectors on our new federal program. 50 organic inspectors from around the world came there, of all the head inspecting agencies, and we hosted it. Now, my son said, you got to be nuts to bring 50 inspectors onto your farm, but I said, what have I got to hide? I can't hide anything. I'm pretty visible. In the corner of the bag in the machine shed, they found a bag of treated seed. And they said, hey, there's some treated seed over here. I said, you notice the bag is still full? The bag will be empty. You got a question. The bag is full. Someone sent me this bag of seed to plant, and it was treated. So I opened it, and it's treated, so I left it sit there. I said, you can have it if you want. I said, if the bag would be empty, we'd have a question. So anyway, I got these guys out there, and I said to them, Ray said, you can't buy any trace minerals on our new federal standards unless you got a soil test. And I said, you know what it really says? You can't grow your crop without them. It says you cannot deplete your natural resources and farm organically. Our minerals a natural resource? You bet. And so our federal standards are going to require these guys to mineralize their soil. Now, there's 2,000 organic inspectors. I've only been through 50. I got 1,950 to go. When I get through all of them, you got to be a little bit optimistic in this business. Trouble is they turn them over so fast. What's kind of exciting about that, we got a federal program that was written with teeth in it. Now, here's the first thing that was ever done on organic comparison. I was a little bit upset about this when it first came out. First of all, organic farmers can be nearly as productive as regular farms for some crops, and they leave their soil healthier. Fairly positive, right? 90% the yield on wheat. Wheat is a crop that grows on low fertility. Oats, they don't need any minerals to do that thing because it can suck things out of the ground. That's why Wisconsin was a wheat state 100 years ago. Once we start putting more fertilizer, we can't grow oats anymore. It does a real poor job out there. So then the second one was out here that potatoes fared by far the worst with 38% lower yields, mainly due to potato blight and potassium deficiency. Oh, then I hit the ceiling. I wanted to, this guy speaks Swiss, and my wife's Swiss, and I was ready to go after this thing. I said, where in the organic world does it say we have to starve our crop of potassium? What came first? The potato deficiency and then the blight. And I said, why would they do this? You know what they compared? They compared 4 systems. The 4 farming methods were this: conventional, NPK, pH, then conventional with manure, and then organic by neglect, rotation and manure, no minerals. I spoke at the Upper Midwest Organic Conference. We got 1,500 attendees. This is my most favorite conference. And I had at least 10, maybe 12 professors come up to that conference for the first time ever. They're coming out of the university, out of woodwork. First of all, they got to teach classes in organic. And a professor from River Falls University came up and he said, you mean we can use potassium and farm organically? Oh. I said, where have you been? Read the standards. What do you mean? I said, the law says you have to now. You have to now. I can use any mineral any other farmer can. Why would I starve our crops of minerals? And you see, the biological farmer is probably the guy that grows the best food. You guys, I don't mind the little herbicides, the little pesticides. I'm really not squeaky clean. They're in our air anyway. But I have no way to identify what you produce. What I want is healthy mineralized crops grown on healthy mineralized soils. And organic is a way of identifying those. And you see, organic guys, I got to look out, like I keep saying. And so they compared those 4 systems. The third one was organic by neglect or just manure and rotation. The fourth one was biodynamics thrown into the picture. What's biodynamics? Now, you're in the middle and you put a bacteria prep out here. No minerals. None of them did minerals. And I said, oh my gosh, where's our biological farm in that 25-year study? And you see, the biodynamic people, though, actually did fairly well. They had more biodiversity. When the bottom line gets read out here, 40% more root colonizing fungi that assisted with plant nutrition. Earthworms are up to 3 times more abundant. And the biodynamic had the widest diversity of life in that soil. So these inoculants aren't a joke out here. It's just that that's only a piece of the puzzle. We got to do the whole puzzle. And I talk about that piece of the puzzle all the time out here. Here, my daughter was an exchange to both of my daughters. One went to Chile, which is a third world country, which I was absolutely in shock at the beautiful crops they grew. And I smuggled soil back into America. Now they ask if you got soil. In those days, they asked if you got vegetables. And so I tested it because I was so ecstatic about this thing. Perfect mineral balance. And their boron levels were 5 times higher in their soils than we recommend. And they did not know what the word arthritis meant. In a community of 70,000 people, in a third world country eating local foods. Mountain water irrigation, milk from the mountains watered their crops. Grapes that had 50% higher yield in California. I was ecstatic. My other daughter was in Denmark, and she got to Denmark. She couldn't speak 1 word of Danish, and she arrived there in the middle of the night and moved into a family that couldn't speak 1 word of English. She got up in the morning, and this woman was really good. She could speak a little German, and my daughter could speak a little German. So she had to feed her. She got everything out of the cupboards, and she laid it down. She'd give the Danish name. So my daughter, that was in August. In October, she started learning words then, but she went to a Danish school. She couldn't speak any Danish. She was dumped right in this culture, knew nothing about their language, and they didn't either. She went to a Danish school, and so she had a few Danish kids that could speak some English, but poorly. She went on a holiday for a weekend, and she went there, and then she said she knew a bunch of words, and she went there that night, and she had a dream in Danish, and she came down in the morning, and she could understand what they were saying, but words were missing. And there's pieces all laying over. She didn't understand where they fit. She was the fastest kid to learn this Danish of anyone there because she was in a family that couldn't speak English, and she had to learn it. For me in agriculture, when I took those 2 years off, when I became Ma Zimmer, I started studying this thing to a hilt, and all of a sudden, I saw a puzzle. I saw a picture. I saw how this thing works, and there's pieces laying all over, which I don't know where they fit. But see, once, that's all right. We'll never get it all figured out. But this is a real live system that really works out here. That's what really dragged me into this in the first place. So, what this topic tonight's about is when the book was released, back years ago when I started this business, my goal was to have 10 consultants, each working with 40 farms, and have 400 farms to work with. And then I got to that goal, and my brother-in-law says, now what are we going to do? And I said, if you're a farmer and you got 1,000 sheep, and what do you do when you want to stay at 1,000 sheep? You cull. I don't know what do you do next. I didn't know what to do next. I spent 2 years trying to figure out what to do next. And I finally had a meeting one time, and I said to him, I got it figured out. I want to change agriculture in the world. Oh, he said, oh my gosh, from 40 farms to changing agriculture in the world. And I said, you got to realize where I came from. I'm a product of the 60s. I'm the guy that was the tear gaster, as I told you this morning, and we stood against that war in Vietnam. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is really crazy. I mean, we don't have a chance out here. I said, we're all fighting this war and everybody's in favor of it. In the end, the generals were against the war in Vietnam that brought on that war. Do you realize that? And I said, I saw this thing work. You're familiar with the 100th monkey syndrome? Some of you are. There's a little island off of Japan. This is back in the 1950s. There's a book out here written called The 100th Monkey Syndrome. You see, what we fail to understand on this earth today is that we are all one. And that's why we're all hair and a dog. We are technologically more advanced than we are spiritually. We wouldn't be bombing the pieces out of part of us. We don't understand this thing. And so the 100th monkey was this. They had these monkeys on this island over here, and they fed them bananas. And they threw the bananas down in the sand. They were full of sand. How'd you like to eat your bananas full of sand? And after a while, some of the juvenile monkeys went down to the water, and they washed off their bananas. They could eat. And then a few of the female monkeys went down. The males are so hard to change and so slow. Anyway, and after a while, a few of the males went down. We're kind of stubborn, got a little different ego. But anyway, these hormones, whatever causes this thing. Then the males, eventually then some of the male monkeys went down. And at one point in time, when enough of the population went down, all the monkeys the next day, the whole bunch went down. And what was neat about this thing, all the monkeys on the surrounding islands did the exact same thing. And they had no contact to that island. We are all one and haven't recognized that on this earth yet. And so I say, if we're going to change agriculture, it doesn't take all of them. I don't have to get all of them. We got to get enough of them so the consciousness of the world changes about what we're doing to the earth we live on. We are treating it as a dumping ground. We are not very sustainable. Our youth out here, I was really disturbed with the youth out here because most of the, I'm picking out these young girls over there, most of the youth out here, they're after a God called money. And that's all I've seen. There's nobody that said anything about this. At least with this war going on. I don't know if it's good or bad or indifferent. How do you know? How do you know what you believe? Believing is not knowing. My sister lived in Saudi Arabia and Iran and Iraq. And she has a different view than some people do. And I'm not saying that's a nice guy over there, but I'm not much of a war person because we're all one. And at least I saw those kids stand up for something besides money. And that was exciting. I don't care if it's right or wrong. At least we got to get involved in working on this earth. So my topic about changing agriculture is how are we going to do this thing? I want to take it one point further. We're talking about slandering things. I'm stranded in an airport in Cincinnati, Ohio. 16 hours in an ice storm. I could have been in Australia in that period of time. That Wednesday flight's going to be a bit long, especially with all these sick people on the plane. A little nervous about this. Or B1. Anyway, 16 hours at the airport. It's fun to watch people. They're mad at the airlines because they couldn't fly out. And I said, put them on a plane and send them down. If they want to fly in an ice storm, let them go. Why would they be mad at an airport? I went and bought Scientific American magazine. See that? 5-legged frogs. You been hearing about this? We're killing off all our frogs. A little kid in a science project. There was a kid that won a science award in Germany for this little project. He took GMO grains in one little bin, went to the store and he bought mice that they feed snakes. Put GMO grains in this big box. Put these mice they raise for feeding snakes. Put the GMO grains here and the regular grains over here and he turned the mice in and guess what? They ate all that non-GMO. When they were gone, he forced them to make the GMO and one died. And that might have been by accident. And the other one went delirious. He won the Science Award in Germany for this simple little study. Isn't that amazing? This here is something they can't figure out. Their legs are falling off and they've got 5-legged frogs. And it started in Minnesota on a science project by a bunch of kids. And now they got this thing going. It's in Scientific American. This is last month. This is March issue. And I read the article. I'm standing in this airport out here and I read this thing out here. First of all, they can't figure it out. Science is based on the questions we ask, and we don't know what questions to ask, and it's only based on one variable, and life is not that. See, Doctor, this agriculture is going to change, and we're going to see things changing, and my optimism is powerful because I see it changing. And see, people like when my daughter gets her doctorate degree and she gets tenure at the university, look out. I keep telling people, she's a forceful young lady, and there's a whole bunch of those coming up. Dr. Warren Porter is the head of the zoology department at the University of Wisconsin. He has tenure. He's an environmental toxicologist. We had him speak at our conferences. He speaks at the organic conferences. He only eats organic food. He said, we approved all these chemicals by putting rats in the cage and giving them the chemical. And they were fine. He put the rats in the cage, combined the chemicals. He said, that's the real world, and put them under stress. He said, look out. See, they went back and they found these frogs near chemical plants in the beginning. And so, that chemical must be causing that. They put the frogs in a pen. They can't cause this to happen. They cannot cause this to happen. And so this is now, they got pictures in the Scientific American. You ought to read the article. It's interesting. Dead ponds, no frogs left. It's all over North America. The frogs are just dying. Their 5-legged frogs are just everywhere. Kind of a neat picture, isn't it? 6 and 5-legged frogs, they have no idea what causes it. And so they said it isn't the chemicals. They can't figure it out. You see, they're looking for one cause. What about combining things like Dr. Warren Porter says? Because you see, they're blaming a parasite now. What came first? The same thing as a blight and a potassium deficiency. I say whatever happened, there's a combination of stresses put on here. The immune system got knocked out. The parasites set in. The parasites didn't cause the 5 legs. The parasites are causing the population to wipe out. But that's what they have not have any idea how this works. Because they're so crippled, maybe the parasites now get them. They can't figure this thing out. But you see, someday, eventually, this train is rolling and it's going where it's going. And there's going to be some changes out here. I want to talk about farming now and changing agriculture. First of all, Louis Brownfield, as I talked about this morning, the model farmer, 1940s. We've been 50 years on hold. I told you, this man copied me, and he was 50 years ahead of me. And he talked about changing agriculture. And he talked about farmers. And I want to talk about farmers for a while. This is a part of a keynote presentation I gave at the Acres Conference when my book was released in 2000, December 2000. Determine one. He's talking about farmers. And the story is, why didn't anybody tell us? These farmers are going out here in the 1940s. They wonder why no one told us about this whole system we're talking about. And he said, first of all, this is what Louis Brownfield said in the 1940s. A cubic foot of productive soil is an organism in itself in which every law of the universe is in operation. It is probable, says Mr. Brownfield, that we have learned more about agriculture and the soils in this past generation or less than all of the history of the world. It is also probable that what we have discovered up to this date is only about 1/10 of what there is to know. These discoveries have not only to do with increased food and fiber production, but with the increased quality as well. Poor land makes poor people, and improperly used unproductive land annually causes Americans an incalculable loss in terms of bad health and bad living conditions. This is the new agriculture. 1940. I could have written that yesterday, couldn't have I? Absolutely right. So this here, I got into this Brownfield thing, and I did a winter meeting. And this farmer came up with tears in his eyes at the end of the session. We sold his farm to his son about 5 years ago. And he was in the trenches in World War II, and he had Louis Brownfield's book called Out of the Earth. And he said, when I got done, if I survived the war, I knew how I was going to farm. And I came back to Wisconsin. He said, people laughed at this thing. Nobody knew what to talk to. He said, 1952, he said, I went down to his field days. These are his pictures from the field days at Louis Brownfield's farm, actual photographs. 1952. And he went back, him and his wife bought a farm about 3 years ago. They're in their 70s. He said, I got help now. We're going to do this thing. Isn't that amazing? He got out of it because he lost it. Now he got back in here again. So Louis Brownfield took this thing one step further. He said out here, he said, if we're going to change agriculture, he says, merely to teach a farmer how to observe and what to look for is in itself the greatest possible achievement of one which is too often greatly neglected in our present educational system. He said, students want to know. And he said, what it means to be sparked. He talked about this sparking thing. And he said, a young fella, it needs to be sparked so he'll carry on the rest of his life with a lively interest in all phases of agriculture long after his on-the-job training is finished. The spark, I think, is the thing that's most overlooked in our agriculture training. The lack of it and the lack of the capacity for producing it, and then the possible greatest failure in our education system. If a person truly wants an education, there's nothing on this earth will keep him from getting it. And if he doesn't want it, there's nothing on this earth that can impose him upon it. Once you get farmers sparked and they see this thing, I said they're little seedlings in the beginning. They try things. And then after we get a few of these things, we're going to change agriculture one farm at a time. Louis Brownfield talked about having pilot farms across America. I had a different plan, but mine was after his. I didn't read his in the beginning, see. 1952. Graeme said that's the best group of antique cars he's ever seen in one lot in his life. So he talked about this in 1952. He said, he got up and said, he brought on this thing about what is a good farmer. Let's talk about what a good farmer is. A good farmer in our times has to know more about things than any man in any other profession. He has to be a biologist, a veterinarian, a mechanic, a botanist, a horticulture, and many other things. He has to have an open mind and eager and ready to absorb new knowledge and new ideas and new ideals. A good farmer is always one of our most intelligent and best educated men in our society. Do you feel that way as farmers? You know what list? Nobody forgot on that list? Chemist and geneticist. Now you're drug chemists and drug people. It wasn't happening in the 40s. But there are two other qualities a good farmer must have. Beyond the realms of the inquiring mind or the weight of education, without no man can be a good farmer. These, I believe, they are born in him. They are a passionate feeling for the soil he owns and an understanding and a sympathy for his animals. I do not believe these traits can be acquired. They are almost mystical qualities, and they really belong to those people who are a little bit touched and live close to nature. You got those qualities? Now, here's how agriculture is going to change. Let's go to 2002. This is agriculture in America. 2 years ago, Brian Davis came to my winter meeting. He farmed 1,400 acres. It's his father-in-law's farm. And I wrote this up in our newsletter because this is kind of a really interesting story. It's where we are today in agriculture and why it's going to change and why I'm optimistic about it. And we're going to start putting monkeys on the list out here. Anyway, Brian came to the meeting and he said Adolf, his wife's grandfather, Adolf, landed from Germany. And in 1916, he was the largest farmer in North America. And he came over this country without socks and underwear. He was so poor. And he worked hard. And he had 40 teams of horses and farmed 800 acres in 1916. During the Depression, he lost every bit of it. And he got it all back. And he paid off every man he ever owed a debt. Bankruptcy wasn't a way to get out of debt. Bankruptcy is something he needed to live through. And he got it all back again. He had this huge barn for 40 teams of horses. He put that whole farm back together. And Adolf now handed it down. 2 generations later, it's his granddaughter who has it. And Brian Davis married her, and he married into this thing. He came to my meeting 2 years ago. He said, I'm that far from losing it. Just one more time. And he said, I went no-till 10 years ago. And he said, they told me if I waited long enough, it would get better. And he said, we aren't making it. He said, if it wouldn't be for the horses today, he said, I would have lost the farm. What he raises is Belgian workhorses. And he had 2 teams in the Rose Bowl parade, our big flower parade in Pasadena, California. And he raises fancy teams of Belgian workhorses. That's what saved his farm. So he came to my winter meeting, and him and his wife went home that night, and they listened to my meeting, and he said to his wife and him, they had a long conversation. He said, we have no choice. And he said, we laid out a 5-year plan. This is not a miracle in a gallon jug. This is not a buy a ton of fertilizer for Midwestern Bioag and things will get better. This is not an experiment. This is a reality. And he said, I went home and I realized what I was doing wasn't working. We laid out a 5-year plan, working with chemical, physical, and biological properties. So he rented an 8-wheel drive tractor and a big V-ripper. He tore up his soil. He said, I had hunks that were huge. He said, they smelled like the sewer in my land. He said, I dumped on lime. He lives fairly close to high calcium lime. He got a byproduct from ADM, which is like ammonium sulfate, calcium and sulfur, high magnesium salt. He poured it on. Every acre in the spring he put oats in. He got out and went and bought a cultivator, put dry fertilizer back on his planter. He said, we have no choice. He got rid of some of his acres. Now he farms 1,100 acres. And now we are 2 years later. When he went into this thing, his corn yields were under 150 bushel and soybeans were 40, just to give you reference points. And he couldn't grow a decent oat crop. Last year, test plots averaged over 200 bushel of corn. And 257 was his highest, 60 and 70 bushel soybeans, 85 bushel oats. He said, we haven't grown oats like that in 50 years on this farm. And 38 test weight in oats. He's just ecstatic about this thing. And we had an awfully good year in Iowa. There were really good crops. I don't deny that. He took $20,000 off his chemical bill last year. He said, that's more money than my wife and I have made in the last 10 years of farming. The $20,000 was savings on chemicals. He banded his herbicides. He side-dressed his nitrogen. He cultivated again. He's trying to do some of this without chemicals. Every acre gets oats on it. I mean, he jumped in this thing full bore ahead. He is so excited. He came to my winter meeting and he brought 6 farmers with him. He's putting on roundtable meetings in his community. His crop consultant quit the co-op. He said, I can no longer do to farmers what I've been doing to those guys. And he joined. He's from New Zealand. That's because he's a Kiwi, I suppose. He thinks different. No, I don't know. And the crop guy is out here doing private consulting on this sustainable ag, trying to get some of these farmers to survive. And he brought 6 farmers to my winter meeting. And I figured it out in Iowa. And I hear this all over Australia. If you farm 1,000 acres, then either the husband or wife has to work. If you farm 500 acres, both of you have to work off the farm. That's where we're at. The guy came with 500 acres and both him and his wife got a job in town. And so Brian is sparked. And he's bringing these people with him. And Brian came to me at the end of the meeting. I said, Brian, you need to be a bioag consultant. You're the kind of guys I look for. See, our 50 consultants, half of them do this thing. See, when the book was written, at the end of the Acres Conference, Fred Walters and I started this thing out, and I talked about setting up model farms. And I read Brownfield's thing, and he talked about pilot farms. That's again his field days in 52. And Brownfield talked about pilot farms. He said, we'll never change agriculture by research. That gives us clues and ideas. That's not a model. They only do one thing at a time. You're supposed to take those clues and ideas and put them to work. He said, we're going to change agriculture by pilot farms scattered all across America. Well, Albrecht got fired from the University of Missouri. Chemicals came out. People went to work in town, and we completely went another direction for 50 years. I read this after I put this model program together to do these model biological farms. I want to start a directory. I want them in Australia. I'm going to South Africa in August. I want them in Africa. I want these model farms that some of you people need to step up forward and set your farm up as a model. One of the guys said, what's in it for me? And I said, if I pay you, I will cheapen your message. What's in it for you is what happened to this neighborly thing? Why are you fighting against your neighbors? Why aren't you working together to drive this thing forward? And so I got one more thing to talk about. You see, our American farmers out here, we had a town meeting in Iowa. A guy wanted to put up a huge hog farm. The town hall was filled, and the town board approved it, and he lives in that community. We have a law called the right to farm. My goodness. Would you do that to all your neighbors? You drive across Iowa in the summertime, you need a gas mask. You don't need one in Iraq. It's hog farms, one right after the other. And so our American farmers are apologizing how they farm. They're not proud of how they farm. They're not standing tall. They don't see they have the responsibility of the environment and the health of the nation in their hands, and they somehow don't understand that. They apologize. They say, you want cheap food, don't you? So I keep hearing them say, his Brownfield brought out about this good farm. What's a good farm? A good farm feels the earth. He loves the earth. He lives close to nature. He sees, watches, and learns. He tries new ideas. He's eternal. He is no slave to technology. He feeds many. He works with nature. He cherishes the land. He has faith. He is proud. He values results. He sees the good. He benefits wildlife. He builds beauty and peace. He saves work and money. He stops, looks, and listens. He's intelligent. He's eager. He takes the good with the bad. He's a part of the whole. He knows security. He learns and grows. He lives to work. He's an artist. He knows real satisfaction. He understands the universe. He's a hero. He sets an example. He finds satisfaction everywhere. He seeks practical beauty. He knows he can always do better. He nurtures the soil and he reveres life. Is that what you guys are? What went wrong? I think we can do this again. And I'm committed to want to push this forward. My model farms out here. And so what happened was I bogged down for 2 years. You know what happened? Someone wanted to do requirements for a model biological farm. And we argued for 2 years. You see, I run a dictatorship and I don't have to wait 2 years. I am the president of this organization. And finally I said, no more. You know what they said? Oh, if the guy uses biotechnology, he can't be a model farm. Oh, if he farms over 500 acres, he can't be a model farm. I said, absolutely wrong. No way. I said, it's what between his ears. I work with guys that farm 30,000 acres will be on that list. So they use some Roundup Ready beans. They are choosing technology, but they understand this system. And I am not going to criticize them for that. And so now, if that farmer stands up and he wants to be a model and he's ready for it, and believe I'm starting off with a list of 50. We're doing articles on those farms. We're going to open that directory up and we're going to move this thing forward. Let me show you some model farms. My own. We live under a rainbow. Actually, that farm right there is a neighbor of ours. I got 2 more farms in the neighborhood to get. I got his farm under my rainbow. I'm trying to buy it. And you see, nobody can compete against us because we farm organically. And my kids want to farm this whole valley organically. And we're going to keep plugging till we get this baby. And he's 65 years old. He's diabetic. And the other guy's 50, 62 years old. Well, average farmer's up to 60. So there's nobody, their kids are long gone. I asked him about buying his farm. And he said, well, what kind of money are we talking? I said, you tell me. So I want it. And you'll see, because the thing is that my kids, they're young, they're only 20 years old. They'll make this thing work. It doesn't matter. Our land's not that expensive. In Pennsylvania, it's $10,000 an acre. He's talking $1,500 to $2,000 an acre. Why wouldn't I take it? And so he said, well, I can't yet. He said, I've lost a leg. And he said, if I don't get out and do exercise, I won't last long. I'm sure I'll get it, though, eventually. So anyway, this is our farm. I don't need it right away. I got enough things to do, believe me. I wanted my kids. I showed you, this is Otter Creek Organic Farm, Otter Creek Organic Farm Bioag Learning Centers I showed you this morning. And these are our herd of cattle. I want to talk about these cows a little bit. You see, Johne's disease is a real problem. One of my students from Minnesota came to my meeting and he said, he's the highest producing herd in southeastern Minnesota, dairy farm, milks 180 cows. Can't stop Johne's. It's an epidemic. He wants to know, what magic bullet do I have? And I said to him, look, we started this dairy 3 years ago. We're now certified organic. My herd's in from Belgium, and he's really, really good with cows. I got him from a 5,000 cow dairy farm. He came to my field days 2 years ago, and he said, this is the way we farmed in the old country. He said, this is ridiculous on my 5,000 cow farm. This is the way I want to farm. And so our other herdsman had back surgery. He couldn't work any longer. So I called Edward up and said, I got a job opening for you. And Edward came over, and he interviewed for this job, and we set this thing up. This is our organic dairy farm. We have a lot of success. We bought cows from 8 different herds. If 80% of the farms in America have Johne's, we identified symptoms of Johne's on our farm. And you see, I'm like Brownfield out here. He brought in tuberculosis or Bang's disease in cattle. And he said he brought sick cows to his healthy cows. I no longer see symptoms of Johne's. And we are now joined a test list for test-free herds on Johne's. You see, I want to see this thing different. Now, my herdsman out here, he first came here a year ago in February. He came from a farm with 5,000 cows, like I said, and he had no antibiotics, no drugs, were organic. And he was really quite nervous. Last March and April, we calved 60 cows. They all calved, they all clean. We virtually have no problems. We had one case of mastitis last year, and we lost one cow with a case of mastitis. We used a little Impro and some of these other health alternative homeopathy type medicines. And we had one calf die last year. The cow laid on it in the calving pen. Outside of that, things go pretty well. And he told his friends at Michigan over there that we calved 60 cows without any problems. We're 1.3 services per conception. We got 100,000 somatic cell count. Only dairymen would know the numbers I'm talking about. A dairyman dies to get 1.8 services per conception. We're at 1.3. We're doing embryo flushes. We got flush cows in here. We're breeding old style genetics. We went back to genetics from 100 years ago because the genetics we got today are bred flash in the pan, and the records don't mean anything. They got them by feeding a lot of grain and shots in the rump and hormones. What genetic value is in that bull? And so we went back to old genetics out here, and we're putting embryos in, frozen embryos in these cows. We're 80% stick. And they said we couldn't make 50. So my herdsman tells these people at Michigan, that big farm in Michigan, they call him a liar. He quits telling people about that. And it came along in November. Edward's been this with us 10 months. I said to Edward in November, I said, look, Edward, you work all the time. You need to take some time off. You know what his answer was? Work never killed anybody, but stress did. He said, this farm is non-stressful. He said, I came from a farm with 50 cows in the sick bay, and I lost 45. I only saved 5. He said, now that's stress. He said, my family was falling apart. He said, I couldn't take the stress anymore. He said, this farm is not stressful out here. He said, there's just no stress on this farm, the way we do things. And so I want to be this thing as a model farm. We can put our little calves in huts. And because we got winters, we individually do them. We were group raising New Zealand style. We put them in the huts. The guy that brought the hut says, you got to stake these huts down. And Edward said, look, I came from a 5,000 cow dairy farm. We never staked the hut down. Well, about a month later, a truck went by, blew the horn because a deer ran across the road, and 3 calves took off with their huts across the field, dragging their huts. Edward forgot what a healthy calf does. He takes off and runs away with his hut. We got them all staked down now. See, Edward kind of lost track of what healthy things are like on this farm. We grow super quality forages. I talk about a little bit tomorrow. We make a lot of hay out here. We do everything we can to grow that super quality mineralized forages. We don't buy our production. We grow our production. I told my son, you can do anything you want to do, but no more than 10 pounds of grain a cow a day, no more than 20 pounds of corn solids, no more than a pound of protein, no more than 6 ounces a minute. You can do anything else you want. What did I leave him? Quality forages. He's a little fanatic, a little high-wired about cutting his hay. Don't stand in front of him when he's making hay. He's wired, and I don't know where he got that from, but he's usually fairly quiet when it comes to come cutting hay. It's the first time since World War II that you could buy a farm in America and pay for it in 5 years. My son is 25 years old, and he's real close to $1 million in the hole. I signed on the paper to get him here. Last year, the difference between conventional and organic was $200,000. By the day when he's 30 years old, he will be debt-free on this farm. My father did it, and now he's going to do it on organic farming. The reason I got 5 years out here because it takes that long for anybody else to get in the organic. The organic market's so hot in milk. All the price, we need the price we got for the next 5 years, and he'll be fine. We grow some pretty good crops. We grow our corn, and we do fairly well, and some people come to our field days. There's always, things aren't perfect. We got mistakes, and there's problems out here. We grow some pretty good crops. We don't do shed. We're intense, mind you, but you got to be the farmer organic. These are canning factory peas. I really got excited about this crop. You can't see all the little blossoms in there. They planted our peas on April 2nd this year. When we did these peas out here, they came to harvest them. I told them, look, don't come. I don't want you to hurt my soils. If it's raining out, don't harvest the peas. I worked for a canning factory. I was going to college. When it gets time to ripe, they come in there. Oh, my son called up. He was really upset. They're harvesting the peas, and they're sinking in the ground 6 inches out in this field. Oh, he was really upset. And I got so excited because he now has a reverence to his land. He didn't like to see what they were doing to his land. And I got excited. Now, when they got done, I said to them, look, we'll just subsoil it. We get it going, and we subsoiled it. And then the check came in September. It was $22,000. He went and bought a new truck, and he wants to go peas again. That's the slight problem here. So anyway, it's not all about money. It's about having a good time. So now my daughter, Sadie, she's 27 years old. I'll be a grandfather in May. She's having a baby. Her and her husband got involved in this thing also. Her husband's a city guy. And now they used to custom raise their heifers, and she pasture raises pigs. Those 2 little little guys she bottle fed. She rotationally grazed them every day. Consumers want what they produce. Our kids get more compliments. You just can't believe they're put on a pedestal in our community. And I live in an area of rich people, and they want these people to farm organically. I got people calling us up and want us to farm their land organically, and we don't pay any rent until it's certified organic. For 2 years, they get no rent. I hook them into this system we're talking about. Someone said, you are good in sales, aren't you? No, I just lock them into this thing. Here's Sadie's little pig. She bottle raised them. Now what do? When a little pig dies, she cries. She can't eat them. This is a problem. So I took her to a large farm out here that pasture raises pigs. He's a good organic farmer. And he gave her a really good lesson. He said, if you're going to have livestock, you better learn to accept dead stock. And so that doesn't mean she eats them. And she doesn't bottle raise any anymore. But I said, now we bought the farm just adjoining ours to the north. They just moved down there. When I've been gone here, she moved to the farm north. So you come to our field days. Next year on a tour, you'll get to see a pasture-raised pig operation. And we're going to have to direct market, make our own markets for this thing. We're going to have 2 kinds of farms. I don't think it's sensible to eat food from animals that are locked in cages and stuck into holes and pens and hellholes. What are we doing to our livestock? And so there's going to be a real division taking place out here. You can have that food, but you can also have this kind of food. That's my farm. I better not go on here too long. Gene Vogel, Minden City, Michigan, 700 acres, certified organic. We'll get the organic guys out of the way. He came to me about 5-6 years ago, and he combined, you guys call it, you got a header? We got combines, you got headers. He headered this field, is that what you call it? We call it combining the field. Beans from this organic farmer. The best beans he combined with the fewest weeds in it. He said, what are you guys doing? And I said, well, we're organic. And he joined this thing. He said, look, if I'm going to farm organic, he's the organic farmer of the future. He said, I'll have no more weeds, and I'm going to grow as good a crops, or I'm not doing it. I said, Gene, we can use any mineral anybody else can. You can be as successful as you want. The limits are yours. And so he's got good equipment. He really does well. There's his farmstead. That's Minden City in Thumma, Michigan, along Lake Huron. Those are some of his crops. Corn, edible beans, navies, kidneys, blacks, pintos. These are some navy beans out here. 700 acres. That's what they look like. They canopy over. He's got clear, clean, beautiful crops. It's not a mess on this farm. And he takes every chance he can. There's clover in his corn. He interseeds his last cultivation. He's got a burner, burns weeds. We got tools and technology today that Grandpa had no idea. We can do this thing. Why can't we do this? I got my weed control thing tomorrow. I'll talk about burners. He's got a weed burner out here. There's some of his corn on his farm. And this is Pete Krager, our consultant. They're neighbors. They kind of farm together. That's some of his corn. He's selling some hay to some farms in Pennsylvania that look to buy the hay. They're out looking at some soybeans. That's Bob Yonda. He heads my Iowa division. Pete Krager's my Michigan division. This guy came from a dairy farm. He was a customer, and now he's my head guy in Iowa. His family's still got the farm. Look at those beans. You don't see a mess out here. Because we farm organically does not mean we can't grow good crops. These are edible bean. And if you don't know anybody grow edible beans, navies, kidneys, blacks, Azukis, any of that stuff, that's an incredible amount of blossoms, and they normally don't canopy over. You have to grow the beans to know what that picture really represents. That's an incredible crop of beans. And you see, they don't have to be problems. These guys are really fanatics about it. And so we say, this is Pete's boy. Guess what he wants to do when he grows up? He wants to farm. That's their beans on their land, and these guys are really good at it. Here's some of his beans in the fall. They got some more soybeans on their farm. This is his wheat crop. We can grow good crops and be organic. That's Pete's clover and his wheat. In the springtime, we put wheat in the clover fields. And that's kind of how they farm. Now, when I was over there in January for my winter meetings, Gene came out to me and he said, I want to show you something. He took me in the machine shed. There sits a brand new header, a brand new truck. We call them pickup trucks, brand new big ute, Chevy utes, real big utes. And there was something else new in the shed out. You see, President Bush made his inaugurational speech this year, State of the Union kind of a thing. I couldn't stay awake for most of it. I have a hard time with this stuff. Never once mentioned the word agriculture. American farmer means nothing to the economy. He wants to give a tax cut to stimulate the economy. I said, I made a terrible mistake. You see, if you give farmers money, they can't stop from spending it. So all you had to do is give the money back to the farmers, and they'd have spent it, and our economy would be on a roll. That's how America was built. My son bought a new truck last year, 2 new tractors, a new skid steer. See, farmers they hate paying taxes. They can't stop from spending money. And Gene's no different. They're excited about that. We like things that rust, rot, and depreciate. That's what farming is. This is Randy Stray. This is the area I was born and raised. Now we're not into organics anymore. Randy runs about 1,000 acres and milks about 8 80 cows or so, a small dairy. We all end up with our Australian rotivator, shallow, incorporating a green manure crop. They really get involved in this thing. Some beautiful alfalfa he grows for his cows. He's real low level. He's 1/6 the rate of herbicides. He's 1/4 the rate of nitrogen that conventional farmers in his area do. Because we play this game of getting this thing to work. Every mineral gets put on, and he's got a nice dairy herd. This is the Mounds Farm down in southern Wisconsin, and that's Alan Bell. He used to be a bioag consultant, and they're not organic. This is the Catholic Church owns this farm. The Catholic Church in America, in the Midwest, they said, they're trying to save rural communities. They said, we don't do something about agriculture, our rural towns are going to die. Illinois has got more ghost towns in it, and it's got the richest, blackest land of anywhere in this country. The bigger the farms got, the more they did business elsewhere, and the towns died right under their feet. And so, anyway, the Catholic Church said, we're going to save these communities. We're going to get involved. They got about 2,500 acre farm, New Mallory Abbey. It's all certified organic. Our ladies in Mississippi, they're biological. This guy's biological. That's just a starter fertilizer, only ammonium sulfate, rotated, real low levels of herbicide. That's only 45 units a N. You don't see a nitrogen problem in his corn. He's really into this thing. He's one of our consultants. The other thing we did last year, we bred a new alfalfa that's bred to fit our fertilizer program. All the genetics have been based on to tolerate salts and ammonias and chemicals. That one's bred on our fertilizer, along with these grasses I've been fooling around with. I want grasses that are higher digestible and perform on our fertilizer program. I don't want that conventional stuff. So anyway, Alan's got some beautiful forages on his farm. This is his dairy herd. We put them in barns. We build these big pens for him. That's an awfully nice herd of cows, if you have any idea. He does really, really, really well on this farm. It's a model show farm for anybody's sake out here, and he's certainly on our list as a model farm. This is Gary and George Mononot. They're standing here. They got twin row corn planter. You see, we're playing this photosynthesis game. When you get everything right, you can make this thing work. Here, my business got started years ago. I had field days down in Iowa. I was going to show all these farmers what we do. So I got a bus, and we made 300 sandwiches, and we put ads all over. One farmer showed up. He says, do we have to ride that bus? I said, but you're going to eat those 300 sandwiches. It's their dad. He headed the National Farmers Organization for the state of Iowa. They farm about 800 acres to 1,000 acres, and it's corn, beans, hogs, and cattle. And they're really good at this thing. See, Francis Child's got the 500 bushel corn, but he put on 500 pounds of nitrogen, insecticides, pesticides, herbicides. These guys are 10 miles away. They had 280 bushel corn, 217 bushel average on their farm with 80 units of N. He said, you come there after a 3-inch rain. He said, just come drive down the road. Look in the ditches. Our dirt's not in the ditches. And when the wind blows in the wintertime, we're the only ones without black snow. And they got really involved in this thing. You got to earn the right to plant more plants. And they're really good at it. That was their they have the 280 bushel corn, that twin row planting. See, we haven't begun to stop where we can take this thing. It's unbelievable. We've been stalled out for a long time. Anyway, those other beans, they're not organic, but they show low input. I got to get into other crops. This is a vineyard in Missouri. He came to Acres Conference a couple of years ago, heard me speak, and he said he wanted to know if I'd work with his beef cattle in their grazing land. So I turned him over to one of our consultants. I didn't even know he grew grapes. He realized that I didn't know what those little round blue things were either. And so after a couple of years of doing his land for his cattle, he said, what would you do a test plot for our grapes? He said, now there's only one thing. He said, don't exceed my budget. I said, well, what's your budget? And he said, well, $325 an acre for fertilizer. I said, oh my gosh, I work with corn and bean guys. We get $50 an acre at max, and they cheat on acres. Oh, that's a 50-acre field, and it's 100. You know how those things go? And so I'm used to those kind of guys. And so after 2 years, you can't believe what we can do with grapes. We don't know anything about grapes. Nothing. We didn't claim to. We put on every mineral. We balance our fertilizer. We put our minerals, and we got our salters. We dump our calcium on. And to spend the rest of the money, we put on compost. After 2 years, his soils are completely fixed. We were the only soil people ever invited to the Missouri Grape Growing Conference this year. And we had a booth, and they served their wine there. Jim Held did, and that's his son, John. That's our consultant. And they're out looking at grape. We don't know what we're looking at. We're just looking. They're chemists. They're winemakers from Germany. And he said, I don't know what you did to the chemistry of this wine. He said, it's the best chemistry we've ever had. And in the United States of America, there's a group of people in the state of Washington or Oregon. There's a scientist that says he can take the raw grape and do the test and test the chemistry in that grape and tell you how good your wine is going to be. And this farm is one of his test farms. I'm looking forward to this. Because if he can really, truly do that, because if guys that test it can. Jim's quite a philosopher, and he got quite involved in this thing. And I said to him, your soils are all fixed, Jim. I said, what do are we going to do now? And he said, oh, we're not backing down now, he said. See, farmer, I said to him, what am I going to do? Your soils are fixing, so we'll just send him more compost and he can't get in trouble. His 2-year-old vines had so many grapes hanging on them, they were afraid they were going to break down, so they started cutting them off. Can you imagine that? I know nothing about grapes. What if I did? I'd be dangerous. It's all about soil balance and healthy things out here and getting the plant healthy, and it does fine for itself. My last farm is an Amish farm from Iowa. And these guys only milk about 30, 40 cows. They've quadrupled in numbers in the last 40 years, and we got 4% of the American farmers left. I said, there's 3 means of communication in America: telephone, television, and Amish. If you get one, you get them all. They communicate really well. They don't have any televisions. They don't have any phones. They do have a little more technology than they used to. They didn't accept technology because they didn't want technology to destroy their communities. That was what it's all about. Anyway, he thinks he can get all this milk from these little Jersey cows. See, we're not prejudiced. We got Jerseys too. He thinks he can do that all for nothing but straight pastures, or heavy mineralized pastures. They don't look too shabby, do they? No, this community is putting up their own cheese plant. They now have an egg factory. They got 100,000 organic hens. That's 1,000 per farm on 100 Amish farms. 1,000 makes a unit. They got to be out pasturing them. Now they're building a broiler processing plant. They got a cheese factory and an egg factory in this community in Kelowna, Iowa. And the Mennonite and Amish people built it themselves. They take no government money. They don't touch the government incomes. Anyway, now their whole story. You can't take their picture from the front. Isn't this what it's all about? This is that Roman Stoltzfus thing out here. See, we can change agriculture, and it's about the farms and the success of these guys doing it. And if you're only one in your community, then you need to start out. Some of you people need to step up as these model farms. You need to work forward and take this thing forward. It's the only chance we have left to save this planet, in my opinion, agriculture. It doesn't take all of us. We only need 100 monkeys. We probably got 20 so far. So thank you. That's my changing.